Welcome to Firm and Final. I'm your host, Mehb Koja, and for those who don't know, Firm and Final is a show that explores the leaders in past and present in the self-funding, stop-loss, and reinsurance industry. And today, my guest is Dan Davey. Now, first and foremost, Dan and I are longtime friends. We both grew up at Mercer, and it was at a time when Mercer was changing the way they were working on stop-loss nationally. And through that, created an opportunity to do some things new. And Dan and I started working together. And at the time, Mercer's stop-loss business was north of $1 billion. So it was a lot of fun. So Dan, I'm really happy to have you as guest number one on Firm and Final. Thanks for joining.
No, thanks for having me. I did enjoy season one, so happy to be here.
Yeah, good. And this is different. So last year was audio only. And this year we're trying something new. We're moving to video. You're guest number one, and I don't know how to do this all that well. So I'm thinking I'm going to mess up a couple times, but that's okay. We'll get through the discussion, and we'll have some fun. But, the entire purpose of this podcast is to explore the leaders that are in the stop-loss, self-funding, reinsurance industry. How about we just get started with a little bit about your resume? Maybe tell the audience a little bit about where you work today, what your role is, and just a brief history as to how you got there.
Yeah, so currently National Director of Stop Loss here at Alliant. Joined Alliant about 2.5 years ago. So what does it mean to be National Director of Stop Loss? So I'm charged with, virtually everything that touches a stop loss product, everything from carrier relations to product development, just general kind of subject matter expertise around the product and the industry in general.
How did you get into the stop loss and self-funding industry?
Yeah, so I started in this industry. Gosh, it's crazy. It's been over 20 years now. Started as an intern and immediately was, most of the activity and the clients I worked on were in the self-funded space. And then some of the more senior folks in the office where I worked had more national roles when it came to stop loss and what that meant at the time. So within my first couple of years, I was pulled into, just the stop loss product, some of the challenges and some of the changes that were happening at that time. So, it was virtually immediate, and I was voluntold to enjoy the product. So here I am.
Did you start right away at Mercer?
Yeah. So I started 2003 as an intern. If you ever seen the movie, The Intern with Robert De Niro, where he's like older and in this tech space and an intern. That's how I felt because all the other interns were like 19 years old. So yeah, no, that's how I got started. And then just, from intern, up through the ranks over time.
Yeah. And did you spend most of your time at Mercer before you moved on to this role at Alliant?
Yeah. So yeah, those are the only two stops I've made so far in my career.
So what did it take to become the national stop loss director? Like, what was the type of work you were doing that led up to this role?
Well, I had a lot more hair when I first started, but it was really, I think there's two pieces. One is obviously understanding the product itself and the nuances associated with it. If you rewind back to prior to ACA, right, $1 million maximums on most plans. Stop loss was an important part of self-funding, but the risk and exposure wasn't nearly what it is today. Yeah. So, once the ACA came down, there was just more of a focus on the product in general. So, I took to it. I had interest in it. One of the first things I got involved in there was a issue, disclosure, claim type situation. And it was like, here are all these emails, Dan, go through them, sorting through and no two situations are the same. So, combination of, figuring out what is reality and making your argument for your position.
That makes a lot of sense. But when you were in college, did you study anything that led up to this career? Like, did you know you were going to work in insurance?
So I was a financial economics major. So that was a combination of everything from business to finance to risk to accounting. So, it's all, generally related. I don't know that I got out of school thinking, hey, I really want to get into employee benefits for the rest of my life. But yeah, there was certainly on the stop loss side, there's enough financial components of it that, related to what I studied.
So you must really enjoy working in this industry if you've been in it for 20 some years. Tell me one thing that you really enjoy about being in the stop loss, self funding, and reinsurance industry.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I really enjoy the relationships, that I've built over 20 years, both on, folks I've worked with on the broker consulting side and at the carriers. I think generally speaking, we have a really great industry with a lot of really good people. So people say this is a relationship business, but it absolutely is.
Yeah, good. But I got to think not every day is roses and sunshine, right? So what's a piece of this business that maybe you don't enjoy so much?
I think the hard part is, there are situations where, coming from my position, reaching out to a carrier, I mean, it's we need a favor, we need
Yeah,
some help in this given situation. And those are a little more difficult because a lot of times, the problem tends to have a few zeros on the end of it. And, a lot of times you're asking a favor of a carrier that they didn't create the problem, but we're asking them to help clean it up.
sure.
Um, and that just goes back to the relationship piece of it. And I think just communication style and acknowledging when you're asking for a favor versus, trying to make the case that it's someone else's fault.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Maybe without getting into too many details, what's like a sticky situation you can tell us about? And I know that we should be very careful not to talk about current clients or past clients, but just in general terms, what's like a sticky situation you've come across?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of it has to do with the coverage placed and the coverage terms selected. When there's an option on the table that might have been a little more expensive, but provided better coverage, and the combination of, the group and maybe the advisor chose, the less expensive. And then, as we expect, something falls in the middle, in
Yeah,
that gap of what could have been and what is. And, those situations are difficult because, you're talking about insurance policy with contractual language and what is and is not covered. And then trying to navigate those situations in a way that you get to the, obviously advocating on behalf of your client and also recognizing what was and wasn't done at time of placement.
I hear a lot of producers say that stop loss is just a commodity. And if one carrier's rates are lower than another carrier, just move the business. Is that true?
I think it is commoditized in the market. No, it's not a commodity. And anybody that's had a claim denied for, exclusion number 74 in a stop loss policy can understand that. To be fair, on the other side of that coin, I think, if you're working with a group of really good carriers that have committed to, working with you in certain ways and certain terms and conditions, then, I mean, when you narrow it down and the list gets pretty small,
Yeah.
I think then price absolutely is likely the deciding factor. But who you're working with and who even gets on the list to bid on a given opportunity, I think is where the difference is made.
That's it's a really interesting point you brought up, and a lot of producers today, Alliant included, have a list of carriers that they're willing to do business with. When we were at Mercer, Mercer was like one of the innovators of that approach, and now every large consulting firm, brokerage house, is following that model. What's your thoughts on that approach to the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just necessary. And back to what I mentioned earlier about ACA, right? I mean, you can create 8-figure problems, whether they be E&O or exposure risk, denied claims, those types of things, if you screw up a stop loss placement. And if you're not with the right partner who, is looking for reasons to deny claims as opposed to looking for reasons to pay claims. So that screening up front is very important, financial ratings and things like that, and just the ability to pay claims, but then also the willingness to provide the comprehensive type coverage that you want to
Yeah.
recommend to your client.
What's your stance today on working with MGUs versus direct carriers? What's like maybe the pros and cons?
Well, not all MGUs are created equal. Not all direct
Yeah.
carriers are created equal. So I think you can have, positives in both buckets and negatives in both buckets. I think it's, certainly when it comes to like flexibility of underwriting and creativity, I think there's certainly some pros on the MGU side. But again, the other side of that is there's more people and more entities involved in claim reimbursements and
Yes.
back to sticky
Maybe higher
situations.
scrutiny.
Yeah, it's not one phone call, right? When
Yeah,
something's going sideways, it's two or three. So I think that's, it's not an all or nothing type. It's not black and white, right? Like maybe it was taught to us, right, back in the day.
sure.
But I think the market is still heavily weighted towards direct carriers in terms of percentage of premium in the market.
Sure. What role has mentorship played in your career? Is there people that you see as mentors? Are you a mentor to anybody in your career today?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. I mean, I've worked for a lot of great people in my career. Both in my prior life and here at Alliant, folks I feel comfortable bouncing things off of. On or off the record. You get texts from me at odd times too with random
Yeah,
questions. And certainly I've mentored people, and I think that's important to pay it forward. And you work for enough people over your career, and you take things from a little bit from everything, and you leave
yeah,
some things behind, right, with some people. So, I try to kind of take that and pay it forward, if you will.
sure. It feels like our business is going through a bit of a renaissance right now with an older guard that's starting to retire and a new crop of people coming in. And I think business is going to be a lot different in, say, 5 years. What's your perspective on that? What do you think is going to be something that massively changes in our industry?
Yeah, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think the availability of data,
Yeah,
seems to be moving in that direction, right? It's just how quickly will, all the different stakeholders in this industry, both on the payer side and the insurer side, make that data available in a meaningful way. So I'd like to think that, we're not guessing at, networks and their relative discounts, going, like we do today going forward. And then I also think, I mean, at least my personal opinion is that we got to use technology a little bit more in this
yeah,
space. I mean, firsthand, right? How many RFPs do you still get via email and a zip file, right? And
yeah.
someone's got to peel that apart and figure out what it is and rename it, and
It's
you
an
know,
inefficient process.
very inefficient. And not that the insurance industry is all that is not that well known for being innovative, but
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of low hanging fruit that I would hope over the next 5 years we're able to take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're doing this discussion. We're recording a podcast. We're going to end up putting this, a clip of this on LinkedIn at some point. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about social media and what do you think is, there's a lot of emphasis these days on professional branding and putting it on social media. What are your thoughts on needing to expand your professional brand, specifically using social media?
I am on social media. I'm not, posting videos once a week by any stretch on LinkedIn. I think it's important, someone new into the industry, certainly your brand is an important thing to build early on in a meaningful way, though.
Yeah.
I mean, LinkedIn's the easiest example, right? The first thing I do when someone schedules a call with me that I don't know, I look them up on LinkedIn. Where have they
Yeah.
been? What have they done? Who do they know? Being present and being findable, if you will, I think is important.
Good. Okay. Well, we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to do some like rapid fire type of
Let's do
questions.
it.
What are 3 words that best describe a career in stop loss self funding in the reinsurance space?
It's not boring. Every day's a little different.
Yeah.
Problems pop up and you can't make some of them up, so you just take it as it comes. So it keeps things lively.
Good. Speaking of social media, where are we most likely to find personal Dan, not professional Dan? Is it
Ooh.
TikTok, Snapchat, or Instagram?
Well, I'm an old man now, so I probably Facebook is probably where I spend most of my time. Yeah, I'm not fluent in Instagram, TikTok, or Snapchat. So
What about somebody new coming into the industry and they came to you looking for a suggestion on where to get started in their career? Would you advise them to go the broker consultant path, the traditional carrier path, or maybe like the next generation solutions slash carriers, like stuff like RBP or things of that nature, captives and whatnot?
full disclosure, right? I've only ever worked on the broker consultant side of things, but I think that's where I would recommend someone start. And the reason for that is you get to see everything. I mean, if you have the right type of role or, general analyst type role coming in, employee benefits space, I mean, you see a lot of carriers, you see the point solutions, you interact with, the TPAs, the PBMs, and you get a feel for kind of who does what within this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then, you determine, okay, I like where I am, or, hey, that's really interesting, or, hey, I'd never want to go work over there. But I think it gives you a little bit of everything, as opposed to starting maybe on the carrier side where, you see what you see. I think the broker and consultants get exposed to a lot more earlier.
Okay. What is like one of your passions outside of work, outside of your professional life? What's something that you really enjoy?
I don't know about passion. I mean, I still play a lot of golf. I played in college, so that's something that I spend a lot of my free time doing. I don't know if passion's quite the right word, but it's definitely a hobby and something that I spend time maybe.
That's pretty stereotypical for an insurance guy to be.
It is pretty stereotypical.
Like,
agreed.
You must have known when you were in college playing golf that you're going to end up in the insurance career.
I had no idea, to be honest. Although it didn't take very long, early in my career to get, say, tapped on the shoulder, be like, hey, Dan, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm working on this RFP. Well, we need an extra, go play golf this afternoon. Are you interested? And it's like, that's an automatic yes. So
good.
It helped.
All right. What about if you could do it all over again, different career path? What's something that what you know today about professional life? What's maybe a different career path you would have thought about?
I like the industry that we're in, and I like where I landed. If I were to choose kind of another path, I think I might pursue law.
Okay.
One of the things, I'm back to your earlier question, one of the things I like about this industry, I like making my case, making my argument, finding an angle.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to do that because it's not all straightforward. I think I would enjoy that type of critical thinking, and just trying to figure out, okay, how do we get from A to B?
What about this topic, working from home? Somebody new gets started working on your team. What is your thoughts and opinions on somebody new, either staying at home and working remotely or coming into the office?
I mean, I wouldn't have progressed in my career nearly as quickly or to where I am today without the support I got from people around me in the office. I mean, just learning the industry and understanding, whether it's hearing conversations, being able to pop into someone's office. I just think someone new to this industry, and it probably applies to just about any professional services type of role, I think you're doing yourself a disservice if obviously some people have to, and, you are where you are, but if you have an opportunity to spend time in the office with people that have been doing it a while, in addition to people that are, learning like you are, I think, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity wasted if you don't take that opportunity.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. I think back to the amount of things that I learned from the person sitting right next to me, exactly what you said. But then just like the water cooler effect of spending other time with people in the office and the exposure that gets you, the opportunities it gets you to work on other projects, especially if you're working in like a consulting firm type of environment where there's multiple projects going on, right?
Yep.
And sometimes somebody just needs a body, somebody who's around. And if you're that body, you get tapped to help on that project. So
absolutely,
I definitely agree with that. Why don't we turn things around for a second here? And I'm going to give you a chance to ask me any question you want. And no guardrails here. Go for anything you want to ask.
All right. So I was thinking about this a little bit. I'm going to go two-parter on you.
All right.
So you've been on both sides of the fence, right? On the broker consulting side and the carrier side. Broker consultant first, carrier second, right? What was one of the most surprising things to you when you got to the carrier side? Whether that's perception, reality versus what you thought you knew on the broker side.
So when I got to the carrier side, and it probably started for me when I got to MRM, because MRM was underwriting on behalf of carriers. But a stop loss product it's a legal document. It's regulatorily filed. It's governed by state insurance, and there's a lot of complexities to that. So when we were sitting at Mercer, you were sitting in New Jersey, I was sitting in Chicago, and we were placing stop loss business for clients all over the country, I did not realize that the laws differed state to state. And then in order to get filed in a certain state, so, we were already working with well established carriers. But if you're a new carrier, you can get filed in certain states with the snap of your finger. And there's others that take a year to 2 years and a lot of scrutiny in order to get filed. So that's something I think I took for granted when I was on the consulting side. If I had a client in Washington, it was okay. So send the stop loss marketing to all these carriers; they should be able to quote it. And then you come to find out that not all of them have a filing in that state because it's extremely difficult to do business in that state from an insurance perspective. So I definitely took that piece for granted. What was the second part of your question?
All the people that place stop loss in this market, if there's something you wish all of them knew, either about the product, the process, pricing, filing, like what do you wish you could scream from the mountaintops and have everyone actually absorb?
I think it's the concept of ongoing risk. This is the area where brokers, consultants, and carriers have the most disagreements. It's the view of what we think the ongoing risk is on the case and maybe on a claimant, and potentially it could lead to a laser. And look, lasers are like a four-letter word in our industry, right? And so just having like a consistent understanding would be really helpful. Now, I think carriers don't even have a consistent understanding of assessing ongoing risk, which is why a broker or consultant will come back to you and say, hey, you're the only one who lasered this claimant. Nobody else lasered this claimant. You guys are the only ones who think that this claimant's going to blow up. And so I think some of that is learning on this side of the fence as well.
How much does that matter, that feedback?
I think a broker and consultant's job is to get the best possible rate and situation and policy for their policyholders, for their client. And so how much does it matter? I don't think it matters a ton at the end of the day. We may disagree on what that ongoing risk is. I think your job is to ensure that you're getting the best deal for your client. And my job is to ensure that we're running a profitable business. And so we're not always going to see eye to eye on that. And this is probably why, really good brokers and consultants work with, several carriers, several, preferred partnerships, because you're just not going to see eye to eye with one carrier all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. So why don't we close it up, Dan, with one last question for you. What's one piece of advice that you can give to somebody who's just getting started in the stop loss, self-funded, and reinsurance industry?
A couple of different things. I would say one is communication and communication style. I think there is, we talk about technology and advances and how that can help our industry. I don't think where that is helpful is on the relationship side. So pick up the phone, right?
Yeah.
And yes, we all do more business via text message, and email's always there. In certain situations, right, when you're pleading your case, when you're, making your argument, or frankly, when you just need to better understand why the carrier is doing something, like a lot of that is lost in translation if you try to do it in a written form. So, and I think it just strengthens the relationship, even if you don't get to where you need to right then, but pick up the phone and call. I think the other piece is just, work with as many different people as you can, certainly early in your career, and take some, I mentioned this earlier, but take something and develop your own style, right? Like there might be people that you really enjoy working with and you enjoy their style and you take a lot from them. And there might be others that, while you respect them, the way they do business, you just don't, doesn't align with how you are. So, it's just understand, because there's not a one size fits all, right? Everybody in this industry, in any industry for that matter, is different. Yeah. But I think it's just important to kind of find your own way there and not try to emulate, 100% any one individual.
Yeah. I was thinking about you earlier this week. I was in Miami and on my way to Fort Lauderdale and passing Sunrise. Remember Sunrise, Florida?
I do. Yes.
You mentioned like there's, communication is really important. There's people you work with. They're just different in how they think about a situation than the way you think about it. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It's just you approach problem solving from a different way. And the best way to resolve that is through communication.
Yeah, it's a lot harder for someone to be mean when you pick up the phone and you call them, as opposed to getting a nasty gram in an email. Certainly.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, Dan, thank you for joining me on this conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
Guest number 1 on season 2. Really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure the audience will really enjoy the advice and counsel you gave them. This is all about passing it down to the next generation and providing a place for people to learn. So thanks for being a part of that.
I really appreciate being here. Thanks, babe.